You're listening to the We Are Libertarians podcast network. Find all of our shows at wearelibertarians.com.
This episode is brought to you by Shopify. Upgrade your business with Shopify, home of the #1 checkout on the planet. Shop Pay boosts conversions up to 50%, meaning fewer carts going abandoned and more sales going cha-ching. So if you're into growing your business, get a commerce platform that's ready to sell wherever your customers are. Visit shopify.com to upgrade your selling today.
This episode is brought to you by Shopify. Forget the frustration of picking commerce platforms when you switch your business to Shopify, the global commerce platform that supercharges your selling wherever you sell. With Shopify, you'll harness the same intuitive features, trusted apps, and powerful analytics used by the world's leading brands. Sign up today for your $1 per month trial period at shopify.com/tech, all lowercase. That's shopify.com/tech.
You're listening to the We Are Libertarians podcast network. Find all of our shows at wearelibertarians.com. Welcome to the Chris Spangle Show. My name is Chris Spangle. It is great to have you here with us today. And we've been spending a little bit of time in the first part of this year talking about first principles and what makes a good society. We talk all the time. Everybody's always talking about the culture wars. And what we try to do here at the We Are Libertarians Network and here on the Chris Spangle Show specifically are talk about some principles that make society work and function the right way. How can we avoid some of these culture wars? How can we avoid some of these issues? And how can we have less of the conflict as opposed to capitalizing on it? And Vaughn Spargur, it's Spargur, right? Spargur. See? I talk to Vaughn every single day and have for years now. And this is the fourth time that we've talked face to face because it's always just in the wall chat. So I don't know his last name, but you guys know I'm bad with names. He knows, so he's not offended. And maybe he can forgive me because as a path to redemption, I will learn how to say it before. So we talked, Vaughn, last time, and you are a pastor, correct? Or you are
Yeah, I'm an associate pastor.
Okay. No, an associate to the pastor. So Vaughn and I talked about mercy in January, I believe it was, and we felt that the conversation was a little incomplete because how do you have you can have mercy, right? But like there's got to be boundaries, and we kind of left it in that conversation where you've got to have your boundaries, but what does genuine change look like for people that you're dealing with in your life that may cause conflict? And we felt like talking about a path to redemption or reconciliation and what that might look like would be an interesting conversation. And thank you so many of you commented and that you enjoyed the conversation. And I know you got a few letters, did you not?
I got one person who contacted me. He friend requested me and then sent me a pretty good message privately on Facebook about how much he enjoyed it.
Yeah, cool. So it always, for people like Vaughn, those notes of appreciation are how they get paid. So thank you, Vaughn, for coming back on today. Let's talk about what is redemption. So what does that look like? Why is it important? And why are we talking about this?
Well, redemption from the biblical perspective is just the idea of to redeem. It's the idea of to... I don't want to get too into the theological weeds, but redemption is when you pay for, when your wrong has been paid for. So when according to Christianity, when Jesus Christ died on the cross and died for the sins of the world, he redeemed us from the penalty of that sin. So we were redeemed by that. So redemption is paying for what has been done wrong.
Right.
And at the end of that, it's over. So once something's been redeemed, once someone's been redeemed, they're no longer held accountable for what they've been redeemed from because the price has been paid.
So why can't I just ignore a problem? Usually I ignore my problems and they go away. It happened with my first marriage. It happens with my health issues. Why can't I just ignore a problem and let it go away? If me and this person are separated or split and there's an argument, then why not just leave it alone?
Well, that's a way to create a huge, I mean, on a personal level, that robs you of the chance to get a deeper relationship with people. Because when you go through tough times with someone, when you have a struggle with them, when you have that difficulty and you work it out together as people in a relationship, at the end of that, you have a stronger relationship. Some of the strongest marriages I've seen are marriages in which one of them did something horrible, and part of the redemption process involved in that process, in that person redeeming themselves, repenting of the things they did to the other person, and then coming back, and their marriage ended up being a lot stronger as a result of it, because they went through that difficulty together and got through it.
Yeah, and I think on a societal level, people feel this tension, unlike in a time I've ever felt in this country.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm a 37-year-old man who's been cognizant for at least 27 of those years. I mean, and I guess I just, look at the tension that exists between people, between family members, between coworkers. It just feels like there's just this separation, and people don't really necessarily know how to get back to a place to have that reconciliation that we're talking about today.
Yeah, and sometimes it's hard because, as we talked about in the mercy episode, the first episode we talked about, we can't let people get away with wrong behavior. That's not a part of a functioning society. You can't just let people do whatever they want and harm other people and just like, oh, I guess, oh, well. No, you have to hold people accountable for harming other people.
Right.
Even in a libertarian society. I mean, we would prefer in a libertarian society, the anarchist would prefer, oh, well, societal pressure is what will hold people accountable for their bad behavior. We will use society and we will peer pressure people into doing. We would prefer that than the government coming in and forcing everybody to do right, which is kind of funny because isn't that what cancer culture is?
Yeah.
To an end, in my opinion, the real issue, the real outrage over cancel culture isn't the cancellation part. It's the disagreement over what is and is not acceptable behavior by society. And that definition is changing, and that's why we're having a lot of the problems we're having right now.
So by that, you mean, let's say somebody makes a racist statement. Let's take the country singer, for instance.
Yeah.
He loses a contract, or he loses a gig, or he loses this or that. And one group of people says he shouldn't suffer consequences for saying the N-word. And then another group says he absolutely should suffer consequences for saying the N-word. Mm-hmm. And so the division in your mind is not necessarily over the action that he suffered consequences. It's that we can't agree on what is or is not acceptable.
Yeah. Basically, one group of people sees what he did as much worse than another group of people.
Right.
But I recently, a couple days ago, I saw an article where he is begging his supporters. He said, please stop trying to say what I did was okay. What I did was wrong. And he has been taking steps to redeem himself. He has met with a number of religious and other Black leaders in that community to find out why what he did was so wrong. And he has expressed what seems to be legitimate sorrow and upsetness over what he did. And so...
No, go ahead.
And that's encouraging to me. I'm not going to say he is legitimately sorry because it's hard to know, especially with big public figures like that. But I think we should just see where things go from there. See what the people that he has been meeting with say. Give them a voice as well. Give them an option. Because if they say, you know what, I think he's legit, I think he deserves a second chance, then who are we to stop him? They're the ones who he affected the most with his language. They're the ones he's been talking to find out why what he did was so wrong. So give them the chance. They should be the ones that have a part of the say in when he's acceptable to come back.
Yeah, I think part of it, we can dwell on cancel culture and just the general concept, because it started, in 2016, 2017, where it'd be like a journalist who had a tweet 10 years before and would lose his job, or a student who tweeted something ugly when he was a 13-year-old and lost his scholarship to Harvard. Like, those are legitimately crazy, stupid things. Yeah. And then it gets to a place where Disney cuts ties with a person because they said something that they don't like, and then, they get another big contract somewhere else. Well, and the
Disney,
argument...
Disney literally cuts people off all the time for much crazier small reasons than that. That is Disney.
Right, and I don't want to dwell on specifics, but it's sort of like the cancel culture thing has metastasized to mean a tremendous amount of things where... if you said something racist, like you'd be genuinely sorry for it and go, well, that's not, who I am, and I don't think that thing anymore. And we've kind of now gotten to a place where I can be racist if I want, and you can go F yourself. And
that is how a lot of them are. And
I guess there's part of this too, is like, what do you say to the person who goes, well, why in a free society, why should I care if somebody else is racist? So what if they're racist? It's the argument that libertarians always like. If you're a new libertarian, you will get into the argument of, is being a racist, can you be racist and libertarian?
Yeah.
Which, yes, and you can, I mean, listen, you can hold
two opposing viewpoints at the same time. Yes.
Right. You're not trying to use the state, but the problem with racist is that it always ends up creeping into state power to oppress the people that you're racist against. So it's very hard to be consistent.
It also completely goes against the entire reason I'm a libertarian. So for me, I have a hard time reconciling the two. Because for me, libertarianism is about, I just listened to your episode about the dignity of the human. And that really spoke to why I am a libertarian. Is one of the reasons is because I believe every single person is important. Every single person is the same in worth. And so I don't believe in otherizing. I believe individuals is what matters. And anytime, and racism, it's at its very core definition, otherizing.
Right. Yeah, it robs people of dignity and allows you become okay with state power abusing those people. But let's not lose the point, because I'm tired and I'm wondering. But, we seem to be dividing into two separate cultures now. The Trump era really split a wedge between two cultures, and we cannot find what is acceptable behavior like we did maybe 10 years ago.
Yeah, and part of that, of course, is as one other podcaster I sometimes listen to, Justin Robert Young, talks about, we no longer have a monoculture. And part of not having that monoculture is now we're starting to split up. But the truth is, cancel culture has been around forever. Dennis is really good about pointing that out. I mean, in the 90s, Tipper Gore was trying to cancel violent video games.
Right.
In the 80s, conservative Christians and some liberals were trying to cancel rap music. We've constantly been trying to cancel things, cancel people for things that they do.
Right.
The problem now is just we disagree with the reasons. And part of the cancel...
Well, I wouldn't say that. I would say that it's flipped. Like, I think the country, when the Dixie Chicks were getting canceled for being anti-war, the country was more center-right than it is now, where it's a little more center-left. And the politics, and I would say that the predominant culture is more center-left, And so they're abusing their power in the way that the Bushies abused their power 25 years ago.
And part of it, as I think about it, is they don't see these people having ever suffered consequences for their actions. They said that racist thing 10 times ago. They never suffered any consequences. So they want them to suffer consequences.
Right.
And there is a point to the justice behind that, but there needs to be a way to say, okay, they've suffered their consequences. That's done.
Yeah. So, for instance, let's say a high-profile person, I don't know, take your pick, race or
Mel Gibson.
Me Too, Mel Gibson, right? So Mel Gibson, comes out and says anti-Semitic things and clearly has some anti-Semitic beliefs. Yeah, absolutely. Had a lot of his contracts. Now, then Reinhold also makes this point. Yeah, he was canceled.
Back.
He's canceled at the time, but all these people that get canceled just go work somewhere else. Like, you can still watch Alex Jones.
Yeah,
but it's still the principle of the thing, and I think I would agree with you, is that it is hard to know because there's different cultures where we're, as you said, we're disagreeing over what is and is not accepted behavior by society at large. And while I would say we don't have a monoculture, we do have a hegemonic media system where you do have two, as many media outlets as there are fairly, everybody's talking about the same thing for all the railing against, there'll never be another MASH finale. But I would say that my point's kind of gotten lost. I'm sorry. So we're arguing over what is and is not acceptable behavior.
Yeah.
But we're also arguing, I think conservatives are saying, listen, where's the path out? Because
and that is a good question.
Eradication can't be the path, right? If somebody said something racist now or 25 years ago, there has to be a path out. Like, there's a race car commentator named Derek Daly who was quoted. So here's this story. This is the craziest story because I did a little work for Derek. Nice guy.
Yeah.
He's a commentator. He was a Scottish driver in like the mid 70s. And so he says something on the air where you use the N-word, but over there it meant something different than it meant here at the time. Well, two people are telling each other this story in the presence of someone who was offended by the story, went to HR, those two guys get fired, Derek Daly then gets fired, and there was no path to redemption. Like, it was a 25-year-old incident that didn't have intent behind it, and 3 high-profile people lost their job, and there was never any kind of like, what's the path to redemption here? And so that's where I would say we all kind of need to negotiate, because I don't believe racist behavior in any way, shape, or form is acceptable. I think Me Too has been largely helpful to society in a lot of ways. But there also has to be a way to adjudicate this stuff in public that gives the guilty, or the accused, I should say, a chance to prove their innocence or guilt, but then also a path to redemption or restoration, if you will.
Yeah,
so how does that work?
I do believe there definitely needs to be a way for people to be to be put back into the good graces of society, because what you don't want to do is you don't want to create a strong, embittered minority of people, because they become dangerous. When people feel like there's no way to be accepted back into society, they become irrational and do crazy things. Do you remember Killdozer?
Yeah, how could I forget? I have a poster on my wall.
And we libertarians often hold him up as this hero, but what happened was he felt that he was wronged by the government, and every attempt that he had to get that wrong redressed was shut down because the government, it was this small little local government that was run like a tyrant, and he just literally got nothing, and they destroyed his entire life. And he got desperate, made that Killdozer. It was a suicide mission. He knew it was a suicide mission, and his goal was just to destroy as much stuff as possible before they killed him.
Yeah.
Because he had nothing left. Same with the guy who blew up the bomb in Nashville. And I'm not saying that those guys were canceled, but that is the kind of stuff people do when they feel like they are desperate, when they feel like there's nothing else.
I mean, there's a great book called Why Young Men, where Giovanni, I think his name, I forget his name, but he writes basically about terrorists and gang members, and now you could fit the alt-right in there, or you have, a large, the incel crowd, right? Like there's a whole group of men that feel disconnected from society. You look at the school shootings, mass shootings, like a lot of these guys kind of fit in that.
Yeah, they do.
How do you bring those people back into society to give them some hope so they can be productive members of society? A job and economic growth is, in my mind, the best way to do it. But, I think it also takes people reaching out to some of the lonelier people and making some efforts to build community.
Yeah. And, I know some libertarians will of course, blanch at this, but there is a great biblical example of what we're talking about when it comes to a path of redemption. If you read the book of 1 Corinthians in chapter 5, Paul was writing the letter partially to tell them that they needed to deal with the situation that was going on in their church. There was a man in their church, a member of good standing, who was having relations with his stepmother. He was sleeping with her, basically.
Listen, guys, that is actually immoral, despite your search history.
And that's in the Bible. I mean, this was a real situation that was happening in the church at Corinth. And Paul told the church that they couldn't tolerate this behavior because it was making a mockery of the church in the eyes of everyone around, and they needed to kick him out. But it wasn't just because it was making a mockery. It was also because it needed to send him a message that what he was doing was wrong.
Yeah, I think Christians or people would tend to think, all right, let's love this person through it. But if the behavior doesn't stop, then there has to be consequences.
Yes.
For people to understand there's limits.
And then if you read 2 Corinthians, which we're pretty sure was written somewhere between 6 months to 12 months later, Paul's writing, and it's pretty clear the church at Corinth actually did what Paul told them, because Paul wrote back to the church, and in chapter 2, he's telling them, you need to forgive him. He's repented of the sin. He stopped doing the thing, and you need to let him back into the church. You need to forgive him. And Paul actually gives more than two reasons, but these are the two that really stick out to me in this conversation. Is number one, so that he is not overtaken by sorrow. And that's what we were just talking about, people that come to the point where they don't think there's anything left. And then also so that Satan wouldn't gain a foothold in his life or in the church because of their unforgiveness. You see, he had fixed the problem that led them to cancel him. And so now that he had fixed that problem, it was time to forgive him and let him back in the church. Now, that doesn't mean that he gets to go back to doing everything that he was doing before he left. He has to earn the right to get back into some of those things that he was doing. He has to earn the respect. He is basically starting back from ground zero. He's got to earn all that respect, all that honor that he used to have that he lost. He's got to earn that back.
Right.
But there has to be a point where you say, you know what? We forgive you. You can come back. And that's what that biblical illustration is. Now,
well, and let's break that down, because there's two sides to that, right? There's the group. Yeah. There's the group dynamics that enforce the group rules.
Yep.
And then there's also the reaction of the man, right?
Yeah.
So I don't want to do this. Who are you people to tell me what? And I'm sure all that happened, right? Like, who are you to tell me what? Who do you think you are? You know, go around town. Well, I'm going to tell you about Sally and what she's up to, because I'm embarrassed, and so I'm going to put other people down. But after that period of hurt, both sides have to be willing to lay down their pride and approach the subject.
And sometimes you have to be willing to not back down with someone you love because they did something wrong. You have to make sure they understand, no, that's wrong. And
no, but it's fake news. The New York Times just makes up things. The left is, listen, you can't tell me what to do because the New York Times does it too, Andrew Cuomo, so therefore I can get away with whatever I want. That doesn't, and this has been my point about him all along, because I'm trying to avoid the use of the name anymore, is that it's the exact opposite of what I believe in terms of what we're talking about, right? Like, I'm sorry, I shouldn't have cheated on my 8-month pregnant wife with that porn star.
Yeah.
And then come and pretended that I'm a Christian in front of you. Like, there's no person in your life that if they behaved the way that he does, you'd have a hard time reconciling yourself with that person, because there's never a redemption. There's no reconciliation. And so many people just have adopted the idea that shame is dead. There's no reason for you to tell me how I ought to live. I'm a victim of you trying to cancel me because I just want to live whatever way I want and do whatever I want to do. And that's not the Christian worldview, and that's not really the way that America is set up in a free society.
No, but I mean, and we've been mainly focusing on how the left isn't forgiving enough, and in some ways that's a bit unfair because they're kind of reacting to the hypocrisy that they see within much of the right as well.
Mm-hmm.
All these people talking about, they won't forgive this person for that crime, but they look past what certain people do because, they're good people. and that hypocrisy makes the people on the other side be like, well, then why should I give you any grace? You're willing to overlook that horrible thing they're doing. You're not willing to stand up to them. So you don't really care about those things. You don't really think that actually matters. And the truth is, we live in a very vindictive society. The U.S. is very much about vengeance, and it's both sides. I mean, people want blood, and they view anybody different than themselves in the enemy, and they don't have compassion for others. And one of the greatest examples of how that is true is just look at our criminal justice system right now.
Right.
I mean, the tough on law crimes of the 90s is one example where we just want to throw the book at anybody who does anything wrong. One thing that kind of annoys me is I hear all these old guys sitting around and they're talking about all the crazy things they did as a kid. And all I can think is, man, if someone did that today, you'd want them in jail for the rest of their life.
Mm-hmm. Right.
Why aren't we showing them the same grace that was obviously shown you? And also the whole convicted felons, it is insane how difficult it is for someone who comes out of prison to return to society right now.
Yeah.
Absolutely insane. Sarah's done a lot of good work on that.
Sarah Brady Wagner.
Yes. Yep. That'd be a really good conversation to have about that eventually. But we have to, as a society, get away from trying to punish people forever for everything they've done. And ultimately, that starts with the individual once again. We ended last time talking about our individual responsibility to show mercy in our lives. And I think that's true with this as well. We talked about how we can't force others to do right, but we need to do what is right ourselves, reach out and show compassion and mercy to others. And this area is also one that we can do that in giving people a path to redemption. Do you have anything to say about that?
No. Yeah.
Okay. And what
preach.
No, this was really powerful for me. A friend of mine, I'm not going to give too many details because I don't want to dox anybody, but a friend of mine owns a small business, and one of our classmates from high school was getting out of prison. He had done some not so good things. He went to prison for a while and he was getting out. And this friend of mine drove to the prison, picked him up, said, "You're working for me. You don't even know how to do this job. I'm going to train you, but you're working for me." And that man who has a felony record is now a productive member of society because somebody gave him a chance.
Right. He saw the dignity that person and respect that person was due.
Yeah.
And that, I think
that is not the normal ending of a guy getting out of prison.
People often focus on the utilitarian view of a person and their worth, and this is a big key to our society. What's the first thing you ask when you walk up to somebody? Oh, what do you do? What's your role in society? How do you offer value to our society? And that a person who has suffered some setbacks or comes from a place that doesn't offer many opportunities, they always need, if you take, go back to Miss Pat's story. Miss Pat was a drug dealer, and she talks about in her great book, Rabbit, the few people that saw her dignity and worth reached out, extended a hand, and pulled her out of and taught her differently and showed her different ways, but she never would have gotten to where she's at now, where she offers a great amount of benefit to society. Yeah. If it hadn't been for those people seeing her dignity and worth from the very beginning.
And that dignity isn't by giving her everything she needed or she thought she needed at the time. It's just like this friend of mine, he didn't just take care of this guy. He gave him a way to take care of himself.
Right.
Because, when you get out of prison, it is hard to find a job. It is extremely hard to find a job. It's extremely hard to find a place to live.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, you got a felony. Most places won't rent to you. Most places won't give you a job. And yet, as soon as this guy got out of prison, he had a job because someone that he knew said, "You know what? I'm going to give you another chance."
Yeah. I mean, just looking past the utilitarian view of what people offer to society in terms of productive value, but seeing every single person just as a person worthy of dignity, love, respect, even the people that you find to be the most grotesque. You know, and I think that's why it's hard to have a functioning free society built around racism, for instance, because you deny the very values of a large group of people that make a functioning society work, which is dignity, love, respect, honor, you know, and how do you have a voluntary society built on that level of distrust?
You can't. And part of it, and this is what I was just trying to focus with that illustration, is we need to reach out. We need to be offering people a path of redemption. Sometimes they're not going to take it, but we need to give people that second chance as individuals. I'm not telling other people. I'm saying each of us individually. Let's stop worrying about what society does as a whole. Let's start worrying about what each of us individually does, because that's what builds societies. It's not everybody saying, oh, well, everyone needs to do this. No, it's each individual person doing it. And if each individual person does what they're supposed to do, eventually things will become better in societies. If each person reaches out and shows that redemption, shows that forgiveness, helps people when they need help. You know, parole, I mean, just look at all these people we have in our nation right now, just getting all these convicted felons, and they don't have a chance to get back into society. They don't have a way. It's so difficult for them to become a part of society. And we need to be looking out for them and seeing if we can give them that chance.
I mean, to go into the Christian world, I listened to this podcast with a pastor of a mega church, and he, I think, cheated on his wife and had a drinking problem. And they removed him from the pulpit, and you know, he got himself clean and help, and he said, I want to be a pastor still. I'm still called to this. Well, and everybody's like, no.
Yeah, no.
But he went through this series of things that the church had put together, you know, this restoration process and in ways to build trust, you know, and there's you know, and I see some of these mega pastors who have kind of fallen from grace who get a new church, and there are some that you can tell are very unrepentant.
Yeah.
That went from Seattle to Arizona, for instance. And then there are some who are, you know, like I think Perry Noble's a guy that had a drinking problem and grew like the biggest church in America from one of the Carolinas, and has a new church and has somewhat like said, no, we're going to, he shows all the ways that he messed up and has made it very clear. So he builds trust with people again, because he's gone through these processes of restoration where the people that he hurt said to him, here is how you can build trust with me again. Yeah. But he had to be humble and say, I know I've hurt you. How can I restore this relationship? And that's where it begins.
Yeah. And part of a path to redemption is the people you hurt are the ones that need to be involved. Yeah. And that's why when we were talking about that country singer, that's why I said it's very important. Those people that he's been talking to about why what he did was wrong, they're the ones who need to be setting the terms for what that path of redemption looks like. And most of them are more than willing to give him that path. The truth is, most people in our society aren't the ones that aren't. They're like, nope, never, ever again. You can never be forgiven. That's not the majority of people.
Right.
As Brian loves to say in the chat, the 10-10-80 rule. You know, you got 10% of crazies on one side, 10% of crazies on the other side, and
80% normal people.
Yeah, and most of us and most people, but we just listen to the loud people, and we need to stop listening to the loud people.
Yeah. No, I think that's where it comes down with the cancel culture stuff. Like, make the world a better place by just not feeding into some of this BS. Like, there's like 1 million trans people in the United States. But if you listen to Podcast World on the right, trans issues are taking over the country, and they're turning all your kids trans. It's like ignoring it will make it good. Like, these, in a lot of ways, some of these kids in high school, it's like when we were in school, it's like the goth kids.
Yeah.
You know, where it's like, I just want to be noticed. Well, notice them, but in a positive way that like helps them feel better about their self-esteem, as opposed to freak. You know, I think sometimes when you watch the cancel culture stuff, people nitpick. They take the furthest extreme of something, pretend that everybody is doing this thing, and the left is coming to get you because of this small example, or the right is all racist because of this one example, and people paint with a broad brush, and that's, you know, it breeds distrust in society.
Yeah. And part of building that trust up again is we need to make sure we are individually trustworthy.
Right. All right. Well, final thoughts, Vaughn.
My final thoughts are just, we need to stop worrying as much about everyone else and start worrying about ourselves. That's really, I don't know if you're starting to notice this theme, but I think it's probably something I'm going to focus on every time I'm on every time you have me guest or co-host, is we need to stop talking and start doing as individuals. We need to start acting, showing mercy, helping people who have been fallen down, giving them a path of redemption, giving them a way back while not excusing what they did, giving them a way to return to the normal society.
Cool, but I'm just going to screech until the other side changes how they're doing things, because I don't trust them. So I'm just going to keep screaming at them to change their behavior, and I'm not going to do anything. I short-circuited him.
No, I was having internet problems there for a second. So I'm not sure what you heard and what I heard there.
Oh, that's okay. All right. Well, thank you so much. If people want to ask questions of you, how can they do that? How can they get a hold of you?
Well, the Wall group is a great place to do it. Walnuts on Facebook, or they could look me up on Twitter. I think my handle is Sungar. I'm not sure. I'd have to look it up. I don't really pay attention.
You're like the worst self-promoter ever.
I know I am. If they're in the Facebook group Walnuts, I'm one of the admins, so I'm easy to look up.
All right.
Also, if they do look me up on Facebook, I'm the only person on Facebook with my name. Literally the only person. I don't know how that works.
Well, Vaughn isn't exactly like the most popular name, and Spargur is like even more. What is that like? Like it's like Dwight Schrute.
Well, it's a Americanized version of a German Swiss name.
All right, cool. Thank you so much, Vaughn. I appreciate it.
Yep.
Thank you for listening to the Chris Spangle Show, and we will talk to you again soon.